Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Today I want to make a dedicated video about Hans-Georg Maaßen, the former head of the German secret police or domestic secret service organization Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, or in English literally translated Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution. I have mentioned him before. I touched on this subject in a couple of videos already, but I think now it is time, in light of recent developments in Saxony and on the federal level, to make a dedicated video about this public servant who is now retired. He was first transferred to another office and then they sent him into early retirement altogether in order to get rid of him. And now they even want to kick him out of the CDU party. In the course of this video, I want to convince you that there are still good people in Germany left, or not everyone is agreeing with Angela Merkel, at least also in the CDU and in the administration, in the so-called deep state or in the cathedral. And that there is a conflict going on between the more Soviet-style socialist forces around Angela Merkel and AKK, her double that she installed before she stepped back from the party chairman office, and more classical conservative people who would have been still mainstream in the 1980s and 90s in the CDU party. Hans-Georg Maaßen can be seen as somewhat of an archetype for this group of people. They even have an organization, it's called Werteunion, the Value Union in English, a subgroup, a wing, a partition within the CDU party still. So first I want to introduce Hans-Georg Maaßen a little bit. Then I want to summarize the defining moments and incidents so far that led to his early retirement and why they want to get rid of him. And then I want to give a general outlook on the current situation. So before I start with the video, let me thank all my subscribers and patrons. You really make it possible for me to make these videos at this rate. If you want to help my channel, please like, share and subscribe. Sharing is especially important because YouTube is burying my channel and my videos. Also, if you find this informative and you like my content, consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thank you all. So Hans-Georg Maaßen was an excellent student and he got a scholarship for outstanding performance. So with that scholarship from the Studienstiftung des deutschen Volkes, he could study law then in Cologne and Bonn. From the beginning of the 90s, he worked at the Ministry for the Interior, and he was also active in law school at the university. His dissertation was about asylum and international law. In 2012, he was appointed president of the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, the German domestic secret service organization, whose goal it is, as the name says, to protect our democracy and our constitutional order from all its enemies. Normally, these are three main directions, that is religiously motivated extremists and then people from the far left and the far right. Those are the three classical fields that this office is monitoring. They do a little more than just monitoring. This is why I call them a secret police force also and not just a secret service agency. So he was appointed at a time when this office was in a deep crisis and criticism was widespread. It is also interesting to note that he traveled a lot when he was young, and he also traveled to Japan, stayed there for a while and also gave lectures there. He also is married to a Japanese woman that he met there on his travels to Japan. He said that he could imagine to retire and spend the rest of his life in Japan, and he also appreciates the fact that in the Japanese language you have different words for certain things or for certain people depending to who you speak, and that you speak formally to your wife and not casually. That is something that I also like very much about the Japanese language, actually. Some interesting parallels here. So now that you know a little bit of background about Hans-Georg Maaßen, what actually led to his fall from grace from the perspective of the CDU leadership? Why do they want to get rid of him? So the first thing was that when Angela Merkel illegally opened the borders in 2015, he was one of the first critics of this illegal act. because he looks at that act from the perspective of the guy who is responsible for security in Germany. He is the head of the office that is blamed whenever some truck of peace happens or something. People and the media ask, why didn't you monitor this guy? Didn't you know that he was dangerous? And he is the one who has to take the fall, and the blame is directed at him. So he thinks, of course, okay, like you open the borders now and you don't vet these people. We don't check these people. Millions of people are just waved through, and all sorts of enemies of our country can, of course, come in with all these people. And he looked at that and thought, are you freaking kidding me? Are you joking? Is this a joke? Yeah? Because all the efforts that his office takes of making sure that these things don't happen in Germany and they can catch these guys before they can blow something up, this is of course undermined by just opening the borders and letting millions of potentially hostile people in. So of course he criticized that, because it makes his job impossible to do. Actually, there was stuff earlier also. For example, he criticized the practice of church asylum. That means that churches can just keep foreigners who actually would have to leave Germany by law. Churches can just give them asylum just like this. And he said this is actually not legal. It is a common practice that is still tolerated, but it is not really legal. He also criticized the fact that a lot of asylum seekers were just accepted here in Germany illegally in the 1990s. And he basically said that if you want to change the law, if you want to do it differently, if you don't think that the current law is still fair or good, then please change it. So he wants things to be done by the book. He's a very correct person, a very good administrator, a public servant. This is how they're supposed to be, I think. So if the government doesn't want to practice the current law, then they should change it and not just break it. And this is what he criticized. If you have a majority in parliament, please make a new law and do things correctly by the books, like it is supposed to be done in a democracy. Don't just ignore the laws and say, but it's the right thing to do. Also now, when we talk about the situation from 2015, we have clear international contracts, international law, such as the Dublin Agreement, that clearly state that nobody can claim asylum in Germany if he's entering Germany from a safe country. Then he has to stay there. Again, if you don't like that, please change those contracts and those laws. Don't just break them. So because of this attitude, he was suspicious in the eyes of the Soviet-style socialists around the CDU and SPD leadership, and he was probably put on their enemy blacklist or something like that. But then there were two big incidents that really led to his early retirement, and that was first the protests in Chemnitz. In 2018, you might still remember that, I made a video about that. Some very exotic people in Chemnitz who come from faraway countries who claim to be in need of our protection in Germany, they violently ended they took the life of a young innocent man. And this sparked outrage and protests and also mourning in the city of Chemnitz. So as I stated in my previous video, it was actually a German Antifa group who published a short snippet of a video with a very misleading title. On this video, you can see how Germans are chasing away a bunch of exotic people who are threatening their families. It is plausible to assume that those Germans were afraid that these exotics would do the same thing to their families as they did to that young man before. After being insulted and threatened by those exotics, they actually step up and give chase for maybe 5 meters, a 2-second chase at best, and those two people are chased away. End of the video. Antifa said that this was a violent manhunt and 800 hooligans were chasing everybody who looks non-German through the city of Chemnitz. An absolute fabrication, an actual lie. The mayor, the police, everybody agrees that none of this has happened. There is no police report. There are no hospital records of injured people, nothing. That is not really what I would expect if 800 hooligans are out for blood. I would expect some broken noses at least. Nothing. Zero. And what did Mr. Maaßen say when he saw this video? And first of all, considering the source from which it came, Antifa, he first said that we have to be very careful and this might be misleading and we have to do a background check first. This very common sense rational reaction was greeted with outrage by the left-wing establishment, and Angela Merkel herself just verbatim accepted the notion by an Antifa group that there were manhunts. So Angela Merkel in direct collaboration with Antifa in Germany. Mr. Maaßen was more careful and said we need to check this first, and this was his first strike. And this resulted actually in the fact that he was transferred again to the Ministry of the Interior under Horst Seehofer. So he was removed from office just because he doesn't take Antifa's word for something and wants to have a background check first. Then he gave a farewell speech in which he said that the German government and the German parties are infiltrated and undermined already by radical left-wing forces. This sparked some outrage again and he was sent into early retirement. What he said though is just a mere fact. It is not an opinion, it is an undeniable fact. This is, for example, in the US, what Tim Pool on his channel shows over and over again. This graph where you can see that the conservatives compared to the 90s have stayed in their opinions pretty much where they were, and the left has drifted from a moderate social democratic position to communist gaga land. And the same can be seen in Germany in the 1990s. By the end of the 1990s, our social democratic chancellor Gerhard Schröder still said that if foreigners commit crimes in Germany, then they should be kicked out no matter what, no questions asked. You break the law, you're out of the country. And that was a social democrat who said that. Now you cannot even say that in the CDU anymore. And things that were just normal and mainstream in the 1990s are now considered far-right extremism, which is pretty much what the AfD says. The AfD is pretty much the CDU from 1995, nothing else. But people act like the Fourth Reich is coming. And this is just what Hans-Georg Maaßen said. It is an undeniable objective fact. But speaking the truth in Germany in 2019 apparently causes you to be removed from office and kicked out of your job. So what is the next thing that happens? You know, now in Saxony there is an election coming in 1 week and Hans-Georg Maaßen is actually campaigning for the CDU in Sachsen. This is actually a smart move because Sachsen is more conservative. There is the danger for the CDU that they lose votes to the AfD, and who would be better suited to campaign for Mr. Kretschmer in Saxony but Hans-Georg Maaßen. They actually do not want Angela Merkel to go on campaign there because that would actually cost them votes. They have to actively position themselves against their own chancellor, and they have Mr. Maaßen campaign for them. And whenever you see him campaign in Sachsen, he is actually greeted with a lot of agreement. People agree with him. People are glad that someone like this is still in the CDU, and that is actually a very smart idea. But now, what does the CDU party leadership under Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer AKK do? They say they want to kick him out of the party. Of course, she's backpedaling and the media quoted her wrong. She was taken out of context, blah, blah, blah. No, she clearly said that she wants to get rid of him. She said that the hurdles for excluding someone from the party are very high, but she cannot see any kind of attitude of Hans-Georg Maaßen that still connects him to the party. She also said that she is glad that he doesn't have any responsibility anymore for the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz. If a party leader says something like that, that means you want to get rid of someone. The SPD also criticized her for not clearly kicking him out right now, which requires a vote, I think. And the SPD actually has a lot of great experience with that, because they wanted to get rid, for example, of Thilo Sarrazin, the only sane person left in the Social Democratic Party. He is an actual social democrat through and through, and he wrote several books about the current state in Germany. The SPD then wanted to get rid of him, which really failed and cost them actually a lot of votes. So yeah, the SPD is clearly the people you should emulate. Yeah, if you want to lose, you can just learn from the SPD. If you want to get from 40% down to 8%, this is how you do it. Of course, Mr. Maaßen is not the only person in the CDU that is still really true to the old party line. There are still these awesome people like Mr. Eugen Abler from the southwestern state of Baden-Württemberg, who stepped on the microphone in a CDU party convention and he called Angela Merkel a traitor. So I don't want anybody on the internet to say that the CDU are just a bunch of cucks. Yes, they are, but not everybody. Look at this guy. I mean, he steps in front of the microphones, TV cameras pointed at his face, and he calls Angela Merkel a traitor to the German fatherland for opening the borders illegally. Now that takes some guts and some courage, and he really has that. Then there is the organization that Hans-Georg Maaßen is also a part of, the Werteunion, the Value Union, and they are a somewhat more conservative sub-wing in the CDU. They also clearly supported him while he is under attack from AKK at the moment. And this just goes to show that the battle for the CDU is not at all lost. These conservative types are just not people who really raise a stink. They are these polite, quiet people who just want to get along with everybody. This is because they used to be kind of the dominant group, the majority in the 80s and 90s, and they had to learn to be very careful and respect minorities. Now they are the minority though. That means they don't need to be so careful anymore. The others actually should be careful not to overrule this minority position, but the left-wing side is anything but careful. They are ruthlessly and without mercy or care furthering their agenda, and they don't care if there are some more conservative people in the party that might not agree with that. They don't make any compromises. They just know their leftist line and they follow that without any consideration for other groups. And I think it is time for these more conservative people in the CDU to either fight for their positions in the party or leave the party. Because for an outside observer, it really looks crazy that people like Maaßen are still in the CDU of Angela Merkel and AKK. Yes, your party has been infiltrated and it has been taken over by left-wing radicals. So what are you going to do now? Are you taking your party back? Or you should just leave them and join the AfD. And depending on how this ends now, everybody can really see what happens to dissenting voices within the CDU, conservative ones at least. That means you're first removed from office and then you're maybe kicked out of the party altogether. Yeah, that really sounds like a place where I want to be as a conservative. I was voting and supporting the union parties, so in Bavaria that's the CSU, for my entire life. But now, especially since 2015, I can't do this anymore. And for me, it will be AfD all the way, because I have looked at objective reality and I have just seen that the CDU is no longer the home of the conservative people of Germany. If you are for fair taxation and for public order and safety and legality, the AfD is the only party for you in Germany. So someone who thinks like Mr. Maaßen that laws should be accepted and if you want to change something, you should change the law first and not break it, guess what? Then you are already ideologically in the AfD. The CDU is no longer a place for you. Alright, so I hope I could show you that there are still some conservative people in the CDU and I have no idea why they are still there. So they should either fight for their party, fight for their conservative values, and then, for example, in Saxony form a coalition with the AfD, or they should just leave the CDU and join the AfD altogether. And I really hope that Mr. Kretschmer is just removed as a head of the CDU in Saxony and that some more level-headed, common-sense politician in the CDU in Saxony can then forge a coalition with the great AfD party of Saxony. I will keep you informed, keep you posted on what's going on in Germany, of course. Take care, be safe wherever you are. Servus, Kameraden.